So, shalom, everyone. Welcome back.
You had a good week, and I have plenty more to talk to you about. Um, I also want to apologize because last week I gave a lot of information, but I had so many holes in what I was teaching you. I went back and I'm now going to give you scripture and more information to help make those holes seem less large, I guess I want to say. So I've got a PowerPoint that's got 30 slides in it. And I'm going to go back now and let's see. I think I've got it. I can see it. Can you all can see it, I hope. Well, anyway, we're going to talk again about Genesis 1. Not too much. It's going to come up. We're going to talk about waves and particles again because that's light. It's also going to be our subject for sound. So both of them are necessary to understand. And we've talked last time a lot about the flower of the sacred flower. And so as we're going into this understanding, then I want you just to be ready to understand a little bit more. And so I created for you some slides and some understandings. But if we're going to look at light itself, understand light is more than what we can understand. First off, light is also a frequency. And by frequency, we find it in two different forms. One is electric, and the second form that we're going to find it in is the form which we call magnetic. So it was Tesla who started talking in the beginning about the fact that what we're looking at is light is made in two forms. It's formed by magnetic electric impulses. Now we know that light travels as waves, but the waves function differently. One is a up and down, and the other one is a sideways. And so they weave together. When an object gets in the way, the waves actually break down and become photons or particles, and they continue on. They cross over onto an open space and they rejoin or go back together. Now there's so many ways, so many wavelengths that are possible. I gave you a little picture here. Hopefully it'll make more sense. But the idea is the fact that we have basically a small window of light that we can see, that we can understand. And there's such a large range or spectrum of waves that run along this same line. For example, gamma waves are on the far end. We don't see the gamma waves, or we don't see the radiation. We don't see the UV. We see the results of the UV rays, but we really don't see them. But then we have that section of light that we would call the spectrum of light that we call visible. Beyond that, we go farther out and we begin to find ourselves talking about radio waves and television waves, FM, AM. All of those are waves also, all attached, all carried by the same substance, light. So it moves from place to place. Now, as we're going through this, understand light's the source of all things. And I want to emphasize it's all things physical and spiritual. They're all coded into the flower for us to try to open up and begin to understand. You know, in the beginning, the world was created, and it gives you that little drawing there to show you the light bursting forth. That was the point behind that. But as you're going through this, understand that this sacred flower that you were looking at basically has 15 different hidden objects within it that are significant, and they help us to understand not only the geometry and the physicalness of the world, but it also helps us to understand the spiritual understanding of the world. Like, for example, I listed them for you across the top. The Visca Pisces, we talked about last time. Remember, it's two circles coming together, and where they cross or intersect, that section that they have in common, that section is a womb. That light comes from a womb. It's birthed into us. Now, when we begin to build the circle of life, we begin with three circles, and that's the beginning of triquetra. Then we go and we create what's called the seed of life. And if you're looking at the seed of life, it's 7 different circles that are interconnected. 7 for the 7 days of the week. The center circle, which creates the flower, is Shabbat, according to the Jewish understanding. Next to that, we have the Magen David, the 6-pointed star. Now, the Magen David was not designed by the Jewish people. That was never a symbol that was found on David's shield. The Magen David came a long ways off from that. It was actually found back further than that, back in the days of the Egyptians. And so it's an older symbol. Now, if you go down below the egg of life, if you look at the egg of life, it looks very similar to the seed of life, only it's not connecting circles in the same fashion. The fruit of life, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the Metatron Krug. The Merkava, which is another starhedron or tetrahedron, is another one. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because obviously there's a lot of things to talk about. But the Merkava is a moving substance. Merkava goes into the idea of the chariot. Now, there's sacred solids are the next 4 that are on that list that you're looking at. Then the bottom 3, I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about. I want to talk about the chakras. I want to talk to you about the labyrinth. And then I want to finally talk to you about the Kabbalah, the tree of life. Those are the ones that we're going to focus on. It's not that they're not all important, but you only have so much time. So I want to try to limit what I'm actually going to be talking about. Now, when we go through this, I want you to understand we're actually going to be doing Gematria in some form, in some way. Now, Gematria is the Hebrew word. The Greek word is geometria, geometry. You remember the character that I talk about, Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon, when he was not studying Torah, wrote math books in geometry. He was an expert in that, but he was not the only one who worked on it. But this geometry that we're going to work on, or this gematria we're going to work on, can be used in all of the Bible, all of the Hebrew side, and there is a gematria for the Greek side, but I don't know that one very well at all, so I leave it alone. Now, for this lesson, we're looking at reducing. You notice there's 3 kinds. You have absolute, where everything is one number after another. So in other words, Aleph is 1. When you get to Yud, it has a value of 10. By Tzadi, it has a value of 90. Down in the 3rd row, you begin and you go across. So you have the total value system that they would use if they were talking in terms of time. The ordinal numbers are basically taking each letter and giving it a value. And the value of Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3. The last one is called the reduced. This is the one that's most often used in Gematria. Now, by used, I mean the fact that what they do is they take the words, and as they're taking the words, they begin to add up the value of the letters of the words. But they're only going to use Aleph is 1, Bet is 2. So they're finally going to end up with nothing higher than 9. And if it goes higher than 9, they have to start over again. For example, I gave you 124. Well, 124 is bigger than 9. So what they do is they, again, 1 plus 2 plus 4 equals 7. That's the number 7, which is also a numerology. And so they can begin to look at that. And when I looked it up, it's told me that this was a powerful and mystical number. It represents intuition, good luck, spiritual growth, completeness. Exploring the power of the seven can lead to self-discoveries, personal growth, and success in all areas of life, but requires dedication and perseverance. So if you really want to be good at Gematria, it's a matter of perseverance. Now, there are websites that you can go to where they actually have already worked out a great number of these. But the understanding is it requires effort on your part. Numbers are also universal. And one of the numbers that's most universal is the number 1. In our particular case here, what we're looking at is what we would call the chakra. The chakra is a Hindu system, Hindu Buddha system. And as we're looking at this system, we have to understand it's composed, or it's dealing with the internal parts of our body, all except the top. The top is above. It's called a crown. In other words, it's not internal in your body, it's external. Now, when we study Hebrew and you're looking at the what do we call the tree of life in Kabbalah, the top of the tree is called the Keter, or the unknowable head. It too is not attached to the head. It's above the head. It's that Ein Sof. It's above. It's incomprehensible. Same way with the crown. It's incomprehensible. Now, there are several books, and the books are called Veda. They're ancient texts that hold a place in the Indian culture, because Indians also have this, not the American Indians, but the Indian Indians. That's part of their culture also. Their books go back 1,500 years. They're written in Sanskrit, and much of what they write becomes poetry, it becomes hymns, it becomes prayers, and it becomes rituals. But if you look at Hebrew does the same thing. It becomes poetry, it becomes music, it becomes prayer, it becomes all of those things. Now, Vedas is going to become very significant to you when we get into chapter 25 of the book of Genesis, because he, the originator, is written there. And we're going to show you where that comes from. There's the flower of life speaks of 7 human body parts, or 7 major energy zones. Everybody has these same energy zones. What we don't recognize, because of all that's gone into us, is we don't normally understand these energy zones. We can understand when our heart is racing, but that isn't exactly all the spiritual understanding that you can gain from that. All of this is here. The section that's over the eyes, that's called the third eye. We're going to get into that when we talk about Hebrew. You see, Vedas and Hebrew have a lot in common. It's not something quite foreign. So let's go to chapter 25. Will you turn to chapter 25 in your Bible? And I want you to go to verse in chapter 25 in the 2nd verse. That's where we're going to start tonight. Okay? Genesis chapter 25, and we're going to go to verse number 2. Now, verse 1 talks about Abraham proceeded and took a wife whose name was Keturah. We recognize Keturah as being also one of the characters that he was married to before, only she was called a concubine in that case, and her name was Hagar. But the word Hagar was not her name. Hagar in Hebrew simply means the stranger. So in the beginning, as a concubine, she was a stranger. She was not a part of the house. After the death of Sarah, he marries Keturah. And in marrying her, he now produces a second family. And she begins to bore for him Zimri, Yokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Now, Yokshan begot Sheba. That's a name that you're going to have to hang into because it becomes important. Now, it's Sheba in my Bible, but it's actually Shiva. The bet, when it's not the first letter of the word, becomes a V, and so it should have been saying Sheva. and then Dedan. So Jokshan had 2 sons. Those sons are listed there. And the children of Dedan were Ashrim, another important name that you're going to have to follow. So Ashrim is there, the Tushim and Lumimim. And the children of Midian are Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Evadah. Those names I want you to go back to. Now we're in 25 again. Go back to 25:3. The name is Sheva. The name is Ashrim. The name is Abidah. Now let's look at those characters and see how they fit into our story. Now, I've already told you Keturah was actually Hagar. Now, the word Keturah is actually the word for a perfume, for a sweet smell. And so the understanding in Hebrew is the fact that she was full of good deeds. She smelled good with deeds. Abraham's children then, remember, what does he do with them? He does not allow them to inherit the land. He sends them away with gifts and understandings. Now, in sending them away, he sent them off to the east. Now, the word where I'm thinking of is the word Hindu, the religion. When you look and analyze the word Hindu, you're going to find out it means to cross the river. Do you remember what they called Abraham? One who crossed the river. So our Hindu religion has something to do with Abraham, and it becomes more obvious the further down you go. So at one point, Hinduism is originally from Brahmanism. Brahmanism. Do you hear? Abrahamism. Abraham. So our religion comes from Abraham. He sent them away with spiritual understandings. Hindu has a great number of Jewish understandings, only their language is quite different, but it's still there. Now let's go to the sons. Sheva is the first one, is also the name given to one of the 3 Hindu gods. Was Sheva one of those who ended up in India? That's the question that comes up. Now, we don't know where they ended. That's the interesting thing. We know that they left for the east, but where, we're not sure. Now, in Hinduism, it's also taught that this is not the first universe, nor is this the last universe. Hinduism sounds a lot like Judaism. This is one step we're walking through life in. Now, there were 3 deities altogether. They didn't call them gods, they called them lords. The first one was Lord Vishnu. The second was Lord Brahma. The third one was Lord Sheva. Again, back to our characters. Each had a specialization in the creation story. Now, by that, I'm saying the fact that Lord Vishnu birthed the universe from a flower, a lotus. Go back to our understanding, the secrets of the flower. It begins to show up again. As you're going from there, you end up with the Lord Brahma. He created the universe and everything that's in it. Now, the next one, different spelling a little bit, but it's called the Lord Shiva. Destroyed the universe so that it can be rebuilt. These are the 3 deities. All of them have a part in integration. Now, another book. Here's the book. It's called The Mysteries of Creation. It's by David Brown. Now, his whole book deals with creation. One of the things that he talks about is the fact that this earth, this universe, has been created 1,000 times. By that, I mean 974 times were prior to the birth of Adam. So there's all of these creations. Do you see the relationship between Vishnu and what we're talking about here? There's this multiplicity of creations. We think of our creation that we're living in now as being the only one. According to science now, they're beginning to think that there was something that happened before the Big Bang, that the Big Bang was not the be-all, end-all, or actually the beginning, but it was actually a continuation of some process that had happened before. We know in the book of Isaiah, the world will end up rolling up like a scroll. Well, if we think of something rolling up like a scroll, we have to think about the way we read the Torah through a cycle. We read the Torah through the cycle. What do we do to the scroll? We roll it up, unroll it again, and we'll go all through it a second time. That comes out of the book of Isaiah, and I can't remember the scripture off the top of my head because I'm getting old, but the idea is there. So this is what I'm talking about. Also, there's another book that may be helpful. Some of you already have it. It's called Sephirot. It talks about the world of formation. It talks about the world of creation. Abraham was said to be the author. By author, it means he's passed down this information. Now, my book is totaled of 398 pages. The information for the Sefer Yetzirah is 15 pages. So I have a few pages of commentary that goes along with it. But the text is only 15 pages. Those are the things that Abraham learned in his life as he went through. So let me go back and put us back on shared screen. Come on, there you go. Now I got to get back to from the current slide. Let's see, where am I at? What happened to here? This is where I'm at. From the beginning, there we go. The next slide I want to show you is called the fruit of life. And by the fruit of life, we have to understand we're talking about the flower of life, but we are now adding more circles. Remember, originally, it was one circle, 7 around it, 6 around it, and 6 around that. Totals out with a third set of circles to be a total of 19 circles altogether. Now, as we're going through this, we're going to add more circles, the fruit of it. In other words, we start out with the tree, we start out with the leaf. Now we're expanding it to find the fruit that's on the tree. That makes a total of 61 circles that are going to be used. And I want you to listen and hear the word circle and the word line. You're going to find it all the way through all of the writings from all of the different religions. Circles and lines are how they express creation. Now, 13, if you remember your Gematria, 13 is the number for Ehad. Ehad. Ehad is the word for one in number, which took me back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Ehad. Now, that's the first line of the Shema, to listen. We're going to be talking about sound and listening later on. Maybe not tonight, but we will get there. But I wanted you to understand this word Ahad, this 13 is significant. Now, if you actually had your Hebrew Bible with you, my art scroll does it, you can actually take the first letter of that word, or the last letter of the first word, and you'll find that it is actually larger than the rest of the word. And if you go to the last letter of the last word, Ahad, you have the letter Ein and Dalet. Together, those two letters form the word Eid. Eid. Eid is the word for, I wrote it down, word for witness. The testimony is about the witness. Witness the fact that God is one. That's what we're supposed to, and we're supposed to listen, to hear intently. Now, as you go through, the other letters in those same two words are put together They do what they call permutation. In other words, they're not lined up identical. They take and put them in the order they need it, and they come up with the word eshbach, which in Psalms 104:3 says, I will praise, or I will rejoice in God. That's what happens. Now, the fruit of life is considered the base of the universe, and it's believed to contain within it the basic structures of atoms, molecules, and all life in general. It also contains within it what's called the Metatron cube, which contains all 5 of our platonic solids. I talked about the platonic solids last time, and I'm going to go through it again, but I just want to start by reminding you, back in the days of Plato, and actually before the days of Plato, there were 5 solids that had been identified that are the building blocks of all of the universe, those 5 shapes that you're going to see. So the fruit of life itself then is going to talk about fertility. It's going to talk about abundance. It's going to talk about growth, creation, and nutrition. Now, this is the Metatron cube. Doesn't look like a cube because it's only got 2 dimensions. But literally it has multiple dimensions. And again, notice you're going to see the 13 circles that were part of that fruit of life. And now you're going to find lines connecting them all together. So you have 13 circles, 38 lines. Those lines then are going to make for us this cube and the interconnection of all the circles to one another. In other words, it's a network. Metatron was the name that was given to the God who is supposedly second in command. We would know him better from the book of Enoch as Enoch. Enoch, when he was taken, back in the book of Genesis in the 5th chapter, was taken. When he was taken, he was made into an angelic form. He changed forms altogether. The circles that you're going to see represent 3-dimensional figures. They're spheres. Kabbalah really refers to these dynamics of the circles and the lines as the basic shapes of everything and the extreme complexion. If you're looking at a circle, you're looking at a feminine. If you're looking at a line, you're looking at the masculine. The lines are much stronger and the women are much more feminine. So there's the difference. Now, this arrangement comes together, and according to the physicists who use this cube in their studies, it deals with what we call quantum vacuum. In other words, everything is drawn within it. It's like a black hole that collects everything. And at the same time, it speaks of emptiness. Science, there's more to quantum physics than I care to go into, but that's the easiest way to look at it. Here's your 5 shapes, if you can see them. Now, the Vilna of Gaon, who taught his disciples about these 5 shapes, he made special attention to what's going on. And again, he was unwilling to rest. So when he was not studying Torah, he was writing geometry books. That's what he was doing. He was the last, what they would call the last chief rabbi of the city of Vilna. After that, nobody else qualified because of his high standing. Now, Plato was supposedly the one who named these, but actually we can find them written by Aristotle long before that, 200 years earlier than that. But these 5 shapes also give us something else. And it's the same in Hebrew, and it's the same in Hindu. The first one is called, as you can see, it's that pyramid-like shape, the tetrahedron, has basically 4 faces. As Aristotle and Plato understood it, and again, as the Vilna of Gaon talks about it, it represents fire. There are basic substances of this earth, and all of them are covered in these 5 shapes. The cube, or the hexahedron, has 6 faces. It represents the earth. It's solid. It's not mobile. The octahedron has 8 faces. That represents air. It's light. It moves easily. The decahedron has 12 faces. That speaks about water. And finally, the octahedron has 20 faces. And that speaks about the spirit. It speaks about that which is outside of the body. So it's one of those amazing shapes. Now, as we're going through, our journey is going to take us lots of different places. One of the shapes that's within our picture here is called a labyrinth. A labyrinth is the idea of a journey. If you look at the black, starts in the very center at the bottom and follows itself all the way around and back until it comes out again. This is said to be the journey of people. We all go through this idea of journey. Now, according to this, the labyrinth says that it ends. But according to the understanding, this is one of your lives. In other words, you will live again and you will go through this labyrinth again, each time improving yourself from where you were before. Now, scientifically, this is called the first law of thermodynamics. Nothing can be created or destroyed, only its form can be changed as it goes through. For those who study Kabbalah, it speaks of reincarnation, the fact that you're walking through what appears to be a metaphor, a spiritual transformation as you're moving from place to place. This is what's going on in the labyrinth. So it's another shape that comes out of that flower. Somehow I must have got my slides backwards, so let me go through this one. In the Bible, go to Genesis chapter, chapter 32? And I want you to go to verse 31. Now, this is a Kabbalistic story because this is a Kabbalistic tree. But you and I have always read this, and I read it and read it and read it until finally, all of a sudden, as I'm studying religions, I guess, and studying the understanding of life, I came to a new conclusion. If I look at verse number 31, it begins by saying, so Jacob called the name of the place Pineal. Now remember, Jacob has fights with the angel. We said that the angel was Enoch, but there's going to be something, or not Enoch, Esau. There's going to be something else here. I want you to keep your mind on this word, Pineal. For I have seen the divine face to face, yet my life was spared. Now, you and I have read the story where Moses wanted to see God. And you remember what God said to Moses? No man has seen my face. Well, if that's true, then what is it that Jacob is talking about? Because obviously he believes that he has seen the face of God, which took me back a little bit, because then I had to look at the word Pineal or Pineal. And when I looked at the word Pineal, I broke it down in its two parts: Pine, which speaks of a face, and El, which speaks of God. So what he's looking at is the face of God. There were no mountains, no high points around the place where they were arguing at in Yabak. So it had to be something else. And then I began to think about the pineal gland, how closely they look. If you change the letter IE with an EA, you have pineal. The pineal gland is that small gland that you find at the center of your brain that produces, for us when we are comfortable, it produces melatonin. It's located in what's called the hypothalamus, which is the grooves between the two halves of the brain. Its shape and size appear to be like a pine nut, but it's named that way. But the pineal gland is also recognized in Kabbalah as the third eye. Remember we talked about the chakras, the 7, The second one that was there across his eyes was the eye. That's the pineal gland. That's the chakra. That's the third eye that you're going to look at. Now, here's another look at this. And now we're going to take it from a different point of view. We're going to take the look at the flower from the point of view of the tree of life. Once again, turn back to Genesis 32:1. And again, you see the story. We're at Yabak. The battle is over, for I have seen the face of God, but God told Moses that it can't be. Here we are. What's going on? This that we're looking at here is also known as the face of God. Now, the top one in our picture is called Keter. That's the unknowable head. That's also called the Ein Sof, the incomprehensible one. It isn't in your head, it's above your head. In other words, it's what we would call consciousness. Consciousness. If you were with me last week, when we started the book of Genesis chapter 1, one of my first questions to you is, what was the first thing God created? And we said it was light. And then we said, well, why did he create light, but he didn't create it, but he has on the fourth day creates the sun, moon, and the stars. What light is he talking about? According to the Hebrew, he's talking about consciousness, awareness of the world around us. Because of all that's happened in our lives, we normally are not aware of all that's around us. Every once in a while, we get a glimmer of something happening around us that turns our head. But that consciousness is not a part of us. You look at the next two, those are Hokmah on the right, Binah on the left. Hokmah is wisdom. The other one, Binah, is the idea of understanding. So our head, if you looked at it and you could divide it, you have the left side and the right side. You've got for yourself two parts. That's the two halves of your brain. You continue on down and you get into what are called, in this particular case, you're talking about Hesed and Gevurah and Tiferet. Those are our emotions. The emotion of judgmental, the idea of being kind, the idea of balancing. And then we have the bottom, which deals with our behaviors, how we act and how we react. That's what's going on. Now, here's a picture of the third eye. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's right there next to the hypothalamus. It's right there. It's a pink little nugget, if you will. That's what we're talking about. Now, science says that that's involved with ESP. I'm not sure about that, but it is dealing with the sixth sense. It's dealing with psychic abilities. And again, for those who do Hindu, it's called chakra, or the sixth chakra. So the idea, whereas many of these terms for the third eye refer to abstract things, the gland reference denotes a special or a specific structure of the human brain from where we hold that ESPN originated. Again, that goes back to Genesis chapter 32, verse 30. That's where we're getting all that information from. Now, when we look at the tree of life, as the Kabbalah is, you see there 10 circles. Now, actually, and we'll get into this later, there'll be 11 circles. 10 are within the body, and the one that we haven't talked about is the one called knowledge, da'at. Now, the circles are the Sephirot. They're connected by 22 straight lines or paths. So remember, circles represent feminine, lines represent masculine. So the Sephirot represent the different aspects of the divine and in the universe. The 22 lines happen to deal with what we would call the alphabet, the Aleph Bet, the letters. So you have 22 letters, you have 10 Sephirot, therefore you have what's called 32 paths of wisdom. That's what's going on there. Now, Here may be a little bit easier to see the picture. Again, I listed for you all 11 of them. But again, remember, if Keter appears, then Da'at doesn't. And if you look at the picture of the Vitruvian man that Galileo or that Da Vinci created, notice he's in a circle. Da Vinci worked very diligently, just like all of the other characters that I've enjoyed over the last few weeks. Basically, this is the circle of life. This is the flower of life. He's within it. That's what we look like. Again, as you look, you begin to see the white circle at the top is above his head. The crown, that's outside. That's the consciousness. Then you begin to look through all of the body parts. This is what's going on. Now, I put next to it, for lack of a better term, it looks more like a puzzle, I guess. But each of those circles, if you could look inside each one of those circles where Keter is, the entire tree of life is. When you go to understanding Binah, the system is consistent. So each one of them has a little understanding. The same thing happens in the cells of our body. Inside of every cell of our body is our DNA. So the DNA is also found in every cell, the same DNA. All the markers are in each individual cell. So the system has already been pre-wired or pre-built for us to understand. Here again, here's the circles and lines. And as I'm showing you the circles and lines, you can see the letters of the Aleph Bet. Now, as you go through then, each letter connects two of the circles. There's a special significance, and I don't have time to go through the book of Sefer Yetzirah, but you can understand what those two circles and why that letter, because the letters are not written in alphabetic order. They're planted, and they're planted there by Abraham. This is where this system fits together. So the alphabet, 22 letters, the circles, or the Sephirot, those are all together. So this is what we're looking at when we're looking at this entire picture. It's all about creation. It's all about unity. It's all about balance. All of that goes there. And obviously, there's interconnection everywhere. Everything is connected to everything else. Sometimes, if you were ever to get into meditation and you began to learn enough about the Sephirot, this becomes one of the sources of meditating. You meditate upon the letters. You meditate upon the words. It's a form of a prayer. One more. Thoughts on light. Da Vinci, Vilna Gaon, Nikola Tesla, they all taught me a lot. I mean, a lot. What we think and what we feel influences everything around us. Science is now beginning to understand that our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our emotions have a physical representation in the world around us. Science is also uncovering that thoughts leave our head as electrical waves of light from the pineal gland. From the pineal gland, the third eye. Now, why would it come from the pineal gland? Well, according to the latest understandings of the pineal gland itself, within it are two micro-sized crystals. I don't know if you've ever rubbed two crystals together, you get a spark. That's exactly what they're talking about in science when it talks about the fact of dealing with this, uncovering these thoughts that leave us as electrical waves of light. To learn this idea, they originally began with a wired cap that they put on the subjects. And as the subjects wore them and they began to take them through the process of looking at images, asking them not to speak, but to think. And as they were thinking, electrical charges left the brain. So what we're looking at then is the fact that electricity is found within the body. Not only that, light and sound both deal with electricity. The idea of vibrations, the idea of waves, the idea of varying frequencies. All of this goes all the way back to Genesis 1:1. Now, I've gone 45 minutes. I don't think I can go much farther, so this is what I'm going to do. Aha, you people didn't go away. You're still here. Any questions about light? Sound is going to take me another 30 or 40 minutes, so I want to just stop here and talk about light.